I was mid-sentence, right in the middle of articulating a key differentiator in our architecture roadmap. 12 high-level executives from Zenith Tech watching me, pens poised, some nodding, others squinting at the slide projected behind me. When the tablet in front of me vibrated, I didn't look at it right away. Years of experience taught me that nothing derails a pitch faster than glancing at a notification. But then I saw the blue light blink once, then again. Quiet, subtle, but enough to drag my eyes downward during a breath between bullet points. Silas Byrne, employment terminated effective immediately. Please exit systems. That was it. One line. No salutation. No explanation. Just a digital guillotine. They timed it mid-pitch. It was deliberate. I knew it with the clarity of a man watching the bullet travel toward him in slow motion. The irony? I was delivering the very pitch that had taken our firm from background vendor to front-runner in Zenith Tech's $72 million transformation bid. My sweat, my strategy, my relationships. I didn't flinch. Didn't even let my eyes dart to the glass wall beyond the boardroom. But I knew Monica was there. My wife, well, technically still my wife, watching from the observation suite with her sister, Renee. They stood side by side like twin statues carved from ice, their arms folded just so, mouths pressed into smug lines of satisfaction. She'd done it. Monica had fired me. In real time. During the biggest deal of our firm's history. Of my career. But I kept speaking. And when the node architecture scales into phase 3, that's when you'll see the real savings, I said, tapping forward to the next slide with practiced calm. Projected optimization rates are actually closer to 41% by Q4. Not a single person in that room knew that I had just been digitally executed. Not yet. No one screen had pinged. No whispered messages. Just me, the pitch, and the aftertaste of betrayal hardening like iron behind my teeth. I looked at the CFO, Marlon Irons, a sharp but fair man who had flown in from Zurich just for this meeting. He nodded as I continued. Good. They were still with me. Every part of me wanted to scream. To slam the tablet shut and announce, you've just witnessed corporate homicide. But no, that would have given them exactly what they wanted. A breakdown. A spectacle. Proof that they'd hit me where it hurt, and I couldn't handle the blow. So I gave them nothing. I clicked through the final slides like a man narrating a future he had no place in. But I wasn't narrating for Monica or Renee anymore. I was speaking to the room. To the people who mattered. People who didn't give a damn who held the CEO title at ArcLight Group. They cared about vision. Consistency. Results. And I was still all three. As I wrapped up, a slight shift in the room told me I'd done more than survive the blow. I'd landed it. Executives murmured their thanks. One of them, their operations director, Lydia, walked over and handed me her card personally. We'll be in touch soon, she said. Then, lowering her voice, that was one of the most seamless proposals we've seen. I thanked her with a calmness I didn't feel, stepped out of the boardroom, and only then let my breath slip out in something close to a growl. My hands were steady, but inside, my pulse was surging. I didn't need to check my inbox to know the damage was already spreading. I was locked out. Systems disabled. Email severed. My entire professional identity inside ArcLight had been folded, pressed, and deleted like a corrupted file. I walked past the reception desk where the assistant, new, barely 24, stood stiffly, clearly uncertain whether she should look at me or not. I didn't make it hard for her. I nodded, offered a polite smile, and stepped into the elevator. It wasn't until the doors slid shut that I let the silence wrap around me like armor. My reflection stared back from the mirrored walls, still crisp in a navy suit. Tie nodded just so, face calm. But the eyes, they were burning. The elevator dinged. Lobby. I stepped out onto marble floors, my footsteps echoing like punctuation marks. The atrium was quieter than usual, probably lunch hour, and that suited me fine. I walked past the security desk, where no one stopped me. Not yet, and out into the brightness of the day. As I crossed the plaza, my phone buzzed again. 3 missed calls. All internal extensions. Probably HR, trying to manage the optics. Maybe legal. Maybe Monica herself. I ignored them. Instead, I opened my contacts. Scrolled to one name. Shiloh Vale. I pressed call. It rang twice before she picked up. Silas. It happened, I said. You're out. They made it official. Mid-pitch. In front of Zenith Tech. Silence. Then, Jesus. I'm not angry, I said, pausing under the shade of a tree. But I'm not sitting still either. She didn't need more. You want me to activate the shell? I nodded as if she could see me. Atlas Bridge goes live. Today. Her voice sharpened. You have assets? All mine. Clean. Systems I built. Methods I own. Desmond's looped in? Not yet. I'll get him. Okay, she said. Then we move. I ended the call, stood still for a moment, and let the city buzz around me. Horns, footsteps, the distant drone of a subway beneath the ground. None of it reached me. I'd just been fired by my wife. In public. In front of clients. They thought they'd ended something today. But what they didn't realize, what they couldn't have imagined, was that they hadn't ended anything. They'd lit the match. And I was still holding the gasoline. It didn't begin with betrayal. Not outright. It began with grief, with board meetings that reeked of flowers and condolences, with whispered strategy sessions that always ended with someone saying, "It's what Richard would have wanted." Richard being Monica's father, Richard Byrne, founder of ArcLight Group, and the man who once said I was the best thing to ever happen to his company. Not to his daughter, mind you. To his company. He never confused the two. He saw me for what I was, a builder, a fixer, a strategist with mud under my fingernails and numbers in my blood. When he died last year, everything shifted. The board didn't appoint a traditional successor. They installed a family unit, as if slapping that term on it would make it look cohesive. Monica as CEO. Renee as head of strategy. And me? I remained COO, but something in the air shifted immediately. The way people looked at me, the way meetings ended before I arrived. Monica said it was just everyone adjusting. I believed her. Back then, I believed a lot of things. We were still sharing a bed, still talking like partners, still going over quarterly projections while brushing our teeth. And yet, when I think back now, I can see the signs like cracks in a windshield. The way she stopped looping me into early development meetings. The way Renee's name appeared on files I'd authored. The way HR suddenly had policies I'd never reviewed, buried in folders with timestamps that didn't add up. At first, I thought it was an oversight. Maybe chaos in the wake of grief. But one day, I walked into the conference room for a departmental sync, and the agenda had been changed, entirely rewritten. The presentation I had prepped for was gone, replaced by something Renee had whipped up. When I questioned it, Monica just smiled and said, "You've been doing too much lately. We wanted to give you space to breathe." That word, space, landed like a cold stone in my gut. I didn't want space. I wanted partnership. I wanted transparency. But I didn't argue. Not then. Because you don't go to war over one red flag. You wait. You watch. You collect proof. So I watched as they sliced pieces of my role away. Not all at once. No, they were smarter than that. It was surgical. They bled me out slowly. One department at a time. My access to vendor meetings was temporarily reassigned. My speaking slot at the Regional Innovation Summit was canceled due to scheduling conflicts. And then came the merger project. Zenith Tech. I had built the entire case study from scratch, 3 years of phone calls, business lunches, whiteboard sessions, and handwritten diagrams folded into folders so thick they required 2 briefcases. I laid the groundwork. I secured the introductory meeting. I wrote the risk assessments and profitability index by hand. And then, 2 weeks before we were set to present the vision to the board, Monica pulled me aside after dinner and said, "Renee's going to walk them through the strategy. It makes more sense politically." Politically. She said it with that same tone she used when telling the housekeeper we'd be hosting guests, like a simple matter of logistics. No emotion. No recognition of the hours I'd put in. Just a decision that had been made long before I was brought into the loop. Renee took the stage at that board meeting and presented my blueprint. Every graph, every scenario, every phase development timeline. My work. Her name. And the board clapped. That's when it clicked. That's when the fog lifted and I saw it clearly. This wasn't a temporary adjustment. It wasn't transitional turbulence. It was a coordinated coup. And it didn't come from some external rival. It came from our bedroom. From whispered conversations in the dark. From Monica, lying next to me at night, resting her hand on my chest while plotting my professional execution. From Renee, sitting across from me at Sunday dinners, smiling sweetly as she planned how to remove me from my own architecture. I remember walking into the house that night, after the board meeting, feeling like a stranger. Every photo on the wall mocked me. Every shared memory warped into a warning I hadn't read fast enough. I poured a glass of wine, stood in the kitchen, and stared at the pendant lights above the island. We'd picked them out together, arguing about brushed nickel versus matte black. She wanted elegance. I wanted edge. In the end, We compromised. That night, though, they just looked cold. Monica came down the stairs, still in her heels, like nothing had happened. She kissed my cheek, took her own glass, and leaned beside me like we were just two spouses winding down. I turned to her and asked quietly, "Why did you let her present it?" She blinked at me. "What?" "The Zenith Tech strategy. You let Renee present my work." "I didn't let her," she said, the corners of her mouth twitching upward. "She was the better fit for the board." "No, Monica. She wasn't. She didn't write it. She didn't build it. She understands it," she replied. "That's what matters." I laughed then, not from humor, but from something brittle that cracked beneath my ribs. "You really think that's all that matters? Understanding someone else's work just enough to wear it like a costume?" Her voice cooled. "Don't be dramatic." There it was. The phrase she always used when I was right, but she didn't want to deal with it. I stepped back, not wanting to say something I couldn't take back. I knew where this was heading. I just didn't know how fast the fall would be. That night, as she curled into bed and reached for my hand, I let her. Not because I forgave her. Not because I believed her anymore. But because I needed the time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to decide how a man rebuilds when his own wife has sharpened the knife. They weren't just stealing a company. They were erasing the fingerprints I'd left on every wall, every deal, every system I had helped craft from the inside out. They were rewriting history while I was still breathing. And I decided then, if they wanted war, they should have made sure I didn't still have breath left in me. Because I wasn't out. Not yet. At first, it was little things. Missing calendar invites. A skipped thread or two on the internal message board. A weekly department report rerouted to someone else. I chalked it up to glitches, maybe even oversights. But isolation doesn't announce itself with sirens. It creeps in like fog, stealing clarity in degrees. I remember walking into the Thursday operations meeting, one I'd shared every week for 6 years, and finding someone else at the head of the table. Liana from HR gave me a tight smile and gestured toward the corner like I was an intern crashing the wrong room. "Hey, Silas," she said, casual and light. "Didn't get the memo? This one's invite only." Invite only? It was my damn meeting. But I didn't make a scene. I stepped back, nodded politely, and left. I stood in the hallway afterward, staring at the beige walls, wondering when the company I helped build became a place I had to knock before entering. Emails began to dry up the following week. My inbox, once overflowing with vendor updates, project drafts, and late-night brainstorm notes, became a digital desert. My name was disappearing. Slowly. Strategically. Even junior staff, analysts I'd mentored, interns I'd hired, started greeting me with the cautious energy of people unsure whether I still belonged. "Mr. Byrne," one of them said awkwardly, bumping into me outside the break room. "I didn't realize you were still, on this floor. Still on this floor. Still on this planet?" I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. I just stepped aside and let the kid pass, his badge clipped proudly to a company I now felt like a ghost inside. I tapped my own badge against the break room door. The light turned red. Access denied. I stared at the sensor like it had personally insulted me. I tried again. Red. Again. I was being locked out, piece by piece. And they weren't even hiding it anymore. That night, at home, I tried to bring it up to Monica. We were in the kitchen. She was making tea. Chamomile. Like always. "Are you going to tell me what's happening?" I asked, voice even. She didn't turn around. "What do you mean?" "The meetings. The permissions. The emails. I can't even get into the break room anymore without being flagged like a trespasser." She turned then, lifting the teapot and pouring slowly, steam curling up like her words. "You're overreacting." "Am I?" "It's just restructuring, Silas. We've been over this." "We haven't been over anything," I said, jaw tight. "Because nobody tells me anything." She raised a brow. "That's dramatic." There it was again. That word. Dramatic. As if facts were feelings. As if her gaslighting came with a velvet ribbon tied around it. She walked past me with her mug and sat at the dining table, scrolling her phone like the conversation was over. I stood in the doorway, not knowing whether to shout or walk away. She kissed me that night. She always did. Soft. Slow. Familiar. But her mouth tasted like distance. And her arms didn't stay wrapped around me long. The next day, the Zenith Tech announcement hit. A full-scale digital transformation. Global scope. Projected revenue? $72 million. I read it on the company's internal feed, posted by Renee. Not me. Not the guy who'd written the original pitch deck. Not the man who flew to Zurich twice just to attend a 3-hour lunch with Marlon Irons, their CFO. I had built the relationship. I had nurtured it, refined it, delivered results to earn their attention. But my name was nowhere. I wasn't even copied on the project's launch communications. Instead, I was assigned to support pitch delivery. Support. Like a backup singer being handed the mic for one verse before fading into the background. I sat in my office, still mine, for now, and stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. I looked around the room I had designed myself. The matte black bookshelves, the framed patent mock-ups, the vintage drafting tools my grandfather had given me when I landed my first big account. Everything in that room had meaning, purpose, and yet, I felt invisible inside it. I walked to the window and looked out at the skyline. 1,000 windows stared back. I wondered how many people out there were sitting in their own offices, slowly realizing they'd been carved out of the very world they helped build. That night, I didn't talk to Monica. I couldn't. I spent hours in the garage instead, sorting through old files, dusting off personal archives. I wasn't looking for revenge. I wasn't even looking for clarity. I just needed something that still felt like mine. Something untouched. The next day, my calendar was blank. Not a single item. No meetings. No reviews. No tasks. Just a sterile white field mocking me. I clicked through folders, double-checked access levels, and opened the team hub. Everyone had updates. Everyone had movement. Except me. My name was nowhere. My title, still COO, meant nothing now. I called Monica's office line. No answer. I called Renee's. Straight to voicemail. I leaned back in my chair, hands folded across my chest, and let the silence settle. They wanted me boxed out. Isolated. Disempowered. Fine. But I wouldn't go quietly. I started compiling. Not confidential files, not protected data. Just my own work. Templates I had built from scratch. Frameworks I had developed long before ArcLight ever existed. Stuff that lived in my head, in my hands, in my muscle memory. I began saving everything I had the legal right to save. And while I saved, I made a call. To Desmond Kitt, a systems consultant I'd worked with years ago. Sharp. Loyal. Unafraid of conflict. And then to Shiloh Vale, former ArcLight legal counsel, fired 6 months ago during department realignment. One of the smartest people I knew. We met over drinks at the Wren, a quiet pub tucked between high-rises where no one would bother us. I slid my phone across the table with a single document open on the screen. Atlas Bridge Consulting. Just a name then. Just a shell. But even a shell can carry something powerful. I'm not fired yet, I told them. But it's coming. I don't know when. Might be tomorrow. Might be next week. But when it happens, I need something to step into. I need a lifeboat. Desmond sipped his whiskey and nodded. You've got one. Shiloh leaned forward. If they think they've cornered you, they've underestimated the wrong man. I smiled for the first time in weeks. The isolation blueprint they thought they'd perfected? I'd just written my own. And mine had a backdoor. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. When the walls start closing in, only a fool waits to see how small the room gets. I'd spent too many years watching companies collapse from the inside, pretending things were fine until the floor gave out. I wasn't going to be that man. Not when I knew the ceiling was already cracking. LOK puff of smoke when they finally came for me. I stored it all legally. Clean. Not a bite of company IP. Just the scaffolding that made me me. And then I started the calls. The first was to Shiloh Vale. She picked up with her usual clipped, dry humor. Tell me this isn't a panic call. It's not, I said. It's a planning call. Silence. Then a rustle. She was switching off her Bluetooth headset. Talk. I laid it out. Not the betrayal. She already suspected most of that. No. I gave her the shape of it. The meetings I'd been boxed out of, the project credit stolen, the silence in my inbox that grew heavier by the day. And then I told her what I wanted to build. Atlas Bridge, I said. An independent consultancy. Modular. Agile. A direct competitor in every space ArcLight thinks they own. You want to fight them, she said. Not a question. Just a statement. No. I want to outrun them. And I need help with the structure. Shiloh had handled ArcLight's corporate compliance for 4 years. She knew every loophole, every policy. More importantly, she knew where the safe lines were, the ones I could walk right up to without stepping over. I'll draw up the shell, she said. But if you want teeth, you'll need more than legal. I already knew who I'd call next. Desmond Kitt. Des had no patience for boardroom games. We met years ago at a tech summit in Boston. He was the guy in the back asking the questions that made panelists sweat. We'd worked together on a supply chain overhaul for a fintech firm, and he'd saved a $4 million project with one well-placed diagnostic audit. I trusted him. More importantly, I knew he didn't flinch when things got personal. He answered my call with a chuckle. Silas Byrne. I was wondering how long it'd take. You've heard. I hear things. I'm building something. Fast. I need someone who isn't afraid to say no. Someone who'll get a plan if it's half-baked. You interested? He paused only long enough to finish chewing something, probably peanuts or his usual sunflower seeds. Hell yes. What are we calling this? Atlas Bridge. Des laughed. Heavy name. You planning to hold this guy up? No, I said. Just planning to make sure when it falls, we have a map out. We met in person 3 nights later at a quiet pub downtown, the Wren, the same spot I'd chosen with Shiloh. Neutral territory. Low lighting. No corporate eyes watching. I brought a tablet with preliminary notes, a name registration, draft mission statement, a list of sectors we could move into. But the most important thing I brought was the vision. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to scream Monica's name in every boardroom or slap lawsuits on press releases. What I wanted was control. I wanted peace, power, and purpose on my terms. We're not going to be another boutique advisory firm, I told them. We're going to be the team companies call when their projects are on fire. When legacy systems crash, when supply chains choke, when the board wants solutions yesterday, we walk in, deliver, and walk out. Des nodded. You're not trying to be ArcLight. You're trying to be the antidote. Exactly. We sat at that corner table until the bartender started flipping chairs. Shiloh sketched structure after structure on the back of a receipt. Des fired off what-if scenarios like a machine gun. I sat there, soaking it all in, more alive than I'd felt in months. Every insult, every dismissal, every locked door had led to this moment. A new path. A contingency, yes, but also a declaration. I left the Wren that night with a full heart and an empty glass, the outline of Atlas Bridge resting in my coat pocket. It wasn't a company yet. It didn't have offices or clients or even a working website. But it had intent. And intent is the seed of every storm. Back home, Monica was already asleep. Or pretending to be. I stood in the bedroom doorway for a long time, watching her silhouette rise and fall with every breath. I tried to remember the last time I looked at her without calculating what she'd hidden behind a smile. I undressed quietly, slipped under the covers, and stared at the ceiling. She shifted in her sleep closer to me. A reflex. A leftover habit from the version of us that used to exist. I didn't pull away. Not yet. I wasn't ready for the explosion. Not while the foundation of my next move was still being poured. But I made a vow right there in the dark. When they came for me, and they would, I would not run. I would not flinch. I would stand tall, and I would not be alone. Because Atlas Bridge wasn't a maybe anymore. It was a promise. And soon, it would be the answer to the question they hadn't thought to ask. What happens when the man you tried to erase builds something better without you? Zenith Tech's boardroom smelled like money. Subtle cologne, polished wood, air purified to a science. I stood at the front of the room, finishing the last major section of the pitch. Behind me, the projector bathed the glass wall with renderings of automated nodes and AI-enhanced distribution modules. Across the table, 12 executives watched me, some taking notes, others silently nodding at key points. I'd practiced the timing, the tone, the transitions, every slide calculated to show not just capability, but trust. They weren't just buying tech. They were buying us. Or rather, the version of ArcLight I used to believe in. Then came the soft buzz on my tablet. One faint vibration. I didn't check it right away. I was mid-slide, mid-sentence, threading a complex point about robotic scalability in warehouse environments. But that buzz, it was too deliberate. Like a pin dropped in a silent auditorium. Something about it made my spine stiffen. I shifted half an inch, just enough to glance down. Silas Byrne, employment terminated effective immediately. Please exit systems. One line. No punctuation. No context. Just a death sentence typed into a notification bar. They did it. Mid-pitch. Monica and Renee timed it down to the second. Not after. Not before. They wanted it to hit during. To catch me between thoughts. To unravel me in front of the very executives I had brought to the table. A digital bullet, fired cleanly and quietly, hoping it would pierce the part of me that cared most, reputation. I looked up. Marlon Irons, Zenith Tech's CFO, was watching me with sharp, evaluative eyes. He had no idea what just happened. None of them did. And I wasn't about to let Monica and Renee have the pleasure of watching me break. I clicked to the next slide. As we move into the integration phase, I said, voice smooth as ever, you'll see that we've designed parallel tracks for AI modeling and legacy migration. That's where the real efficiency compounds. No stutter. No pause. Behind the glass wall, I saw them, Monica in her white blazer, arms crossed, lips pressed together like she was holding back a laugh. Beside her stood Renee, nodding slightly, as if congratulating herself. They were watching from the gallery, safe behind tinted glass, waiting for the fall. I kept going. Every minute I kept speaking, I could feel it, the weight of my name being erased from ArcLight systems. Email accounts locked. Access revoked. Calendars wiped. Files detached from ownership. A full identity purge while I pitched a future I was no longer allowed to be part of. When I hit the final slide, I gave it one last beat. Transformation, I said, isn't just about code or platforms. It's about trust, about people. What you're investing in, what you should be investing in, is a process that doesn't just adapt to change, it leads it. Marlon leaned back. Another executive murmured something to his colleague. Good murmurs. Impressed murmurs. I clicked the projector off. The room applauded softly. I shook hands, smiled, made eye contact with everyone who offered a nod or a business card. When I turned to leave, I didn't even glance toward the glass wall again. I didn't need to. I could feel them behind it, gloating. Outside the boardroom, I made it to the elevator before my phone rang. 3 missed calls. 2 from ArcLight's internal lines. 1 from Monica. I let them ring. When the elevator doors closed, I finally let out a slow breath. Not because I was upset. No, I'd already grieved this betrayal. This was something else. Something cleaner. The closing of a door I hadn't chosen to shut, but one I'd already built a hallway beyond. I walked across the lobby like a man leaving a hotel, not a job. No panic. No calls to HR. No demands to be heard. Just the tap of my shoes across polished marble and the slight smile I allowed myself when I stepped out into the daylight. Sunlight hit me like a curtain lifting. The world kept moving. Traffic hummed. Horns honked. Life did not pause just because Monica had pulled the trigger on my roll. I slid into my car and sat still for a beat. I opened my phone, scrolled past the missed calls, and tapped into my contacts. I called Shiloh. She picked up on the first ring. Tell me. It's done, I said. They fired me mid-pitch. In front of Zenith Tech. Silence. Then, they're dumber than I thought. I'm not going back, I said. Not for explanations. Not for apologies. You're ready? Atlas Bridge goes live. Today. She didn't need to ask twice. I'll activate the LLC paperwork and notify Des. Send me the docs. I'll sign in the next hour. Silas, she said, voice quieter, sharper. They think they killed your career. But they just gave you ownership. That landed. Not like comfort. Like truth. I hung up and sat there, gripping the wheel without starting the car. I thought of every late night I spent building ArcLight systems. Every holiday I skipped. Every plan I revised because Monica needed to run it by Renee. And I realized something that made me laugh. They didn't just want me gone. They wanted me erased. Scrubbed from the origin story. Forgotten. But you don't delete the architect and expect the building to stand. I started the car. As the engine hummed, so did my mind. We had the name. We had the structure. What we needed now were the clients. And guess what? Zenith Tech knew who brought them to the table. They watched me lead the pitch. They saw who had vision, not whose name was on the masthead. Monica thought this was the end. But what she didn't understand was that I didn't build ArcLight for her. I built it for what came next. And this was next. I didn't send an email. I didn't call. I didn't make a public statement. That's what they expected, that I'd scramble, beg, try to clarify, or plead my case. But I didn't. I didn't need to. Because I understood something Monica and Renee hadn't counted on. Clients remember people, not logos. They don't care who holds the title. They care who looked them in the eye and delivered. So I waited. 2 days passed. I didn't check ArcLight's site, didn't look for press releases or updates. I let them make the first move. And sure enough, they did. On the morning of the 3rd day, I received a forwarded email from a mutual connection, a consultant I'd once mentored who now worked on Zenith Tech's internal transformation team. It had been sent to Monica directly. From Marlon Irons. To Monica Byrne. Subject, Project Continuity. We were impressed with Mr. Burns' depth of understanding and the clarity of his delivery during the recent strategy session. For the purposes of continuity and project momentum, we request he remain our point of contact for Phase 1 of the engagement. Short, direct, no fluff. They wanted me. Monica didn't reply right away, which said enough. But when she did, the response was cold enough to make me feel like I was reading a formal obituary. From Monica Byrne to Marlon Irons. Subject: Project Continuity. Silas Byrne is no longer affiliated with ArcLight Group in any capacity. Please direct all future correspondence regarding this account to Renee Byrne, Head of Strategy. That was it. Like I was just gone. Deleted. The reply from Marlon came swiftly. Less than 2 hours later. From Marlon Irons to Monica Byrne. Subject: Project Continuity. In that case, we are placing the current project proposal on hold until further notice. Please consider all outstanding deliverables paused. I sat there in my apartment, reading those words over and over, and I'll admit it, I smiled. Not because I wanted ArcLight to suffer. Not because I wanted to win some petty war. I smiled because, for once, silence had spoken louder than outrage ever could. I didn't need to twist any knives. The truth did it for me. That afternoon, I opened my laptop and drafted a short message. No pitch. No promises. Just a thread, thin, clean, and real. From Silas Byrne to Marlon Irons. Subject: Project Continuity. Marlon, I appreciate the kind words shared with Monica. If I can ever support you or your team through Atlas Bridge Consulting, please feel free to reach out. Wishing you clarity as you move forward, whatever path you choose. No attachments. No desperation. I hit send and leaned back, letting the silence do its work again. 3 hours later, a notification blinked at the corner of my screen. Meeting request. Sender: Marlon Irons. Subject: Atlas Bridge Exploration Call. Date: Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. That was it. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I didn't pour whiskey or text Desmond and Shiloh with fireworks and emojis. I just stared at the invite like it was a hinge. The kind history swings on, and I thought back to every moment Monica dismissed me with a smile. Every time Renee took credit for my models. Every glance in a meeting that said, "You're replaceable." Apparently not. When Friday came, I didn't wear a suit. I didn't sit at a boardroom table with a corporate logo behind me. I sat at the small desk in the corner of my apartment, the one by the window with a view of the skyline, and I clicked into the video call as calmly as if we were catching up over coffee. Marlon appeared on screen, tie loose, shirt sleeves rolled. He looked like a man who just walked out of a board meeting full of smoke. "Silas," he said, "thanks for taking the call. Of course, we talked. Not about ArcLight. Not at first. We talked about continuity, scope, timelines. Then we talked about leadership. About how companies drift when the wrong people try to steer the right vision. You built trust," he said. "That doesn't vanish because someone new claims your seat." I nodded, but didn't reply. Let him speak. "Truth is," he continued, "the board isn't convinced about your replacements. We like clean lines. Your delivery, your logic, it was clear." Renee sent a follow-up, but it felt like someone who had memorized a script she didn't write. "She didn't," I said simply. He smiled. "Didn't think so." There was a pause. "So what does Atlas Bridge actually do?" he asked. I told him. Not with charts. Not with a slideshow. I told him with language. I explained the model. Small team, agile deployment, truth over polish. We don't impress with jargon. We show up, ask the right questions, and then actually answer them. I talked about our 3-phase implementation. About how we'd save them 6 weeks off integration without sacrificing precision. When I finished, Marlon sat back and exhaled. "You've got my vote. But I need to bring in 2 other directors. Is your team ready?" I glanced at my notes. Atlas wasn't a skeleton crew anymore. Shiloh was setting up our legal backbone. Desmond was already mapping out onboarding tools and vendor hooks. We had infrastructure. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. "We're ready." "Good," he said. "Because I think ArcLight just realized what they lost." He ended the call with a quiet chuckle and a handshake gesture before the screen went dark. I didn't move for a long time. Just sat there, staring out at the city while the wind knocked gently against the glass. Atlas Bridge wasn't some fantasy anymore. It had its first client. And that client had chosen us not because we were the biggest, not because we were the loudest, but because When everything else felt like spin, we were the only ones speaking straight. That night, I finally called Desmond. He picked up on the first ring. Tell me it's happening. It's happening. Zenith Tech? Meeting Friday. We're in motion. He let out a slow whistle. Damn, Silas. That fast? People remember who shows up. Who delivers? Who doesn't lie? He laughed. Yeah. Well, I hope Monica enjoys trying to land the next whale without you. I didn't reply. Because I wasn't thinking about Monica. I was thinking about the dozens of other companies out there, all swimming through noise, desperate for someone to cut through the fog. And now? They had somewhere to look. They had Atlas. It started with a single call, then 3 more. Then a calendar request with no subject line and no signature, just a name I recognized and trusted. By the end of the week, Atlas Bridge wasn't just a concept anymore. It was operational, barely held together by adrenaline, early mornings, and midnight calls, but it was moving. Alive. Zenith Tech didn't just want me. They followed me. And they brought company. 3 days after our meeting, they signed. Not just a handshake, not just a verbal yes, but a full signed contract, naming Atlas Bridge as their transformation partner. Scope locked. Phases defined. First payment processed. Then came the surprise. They weren't coming alone. We're bringing 2 partners to the table, Marlon told me during a follow-up call. Our logistics affiliate, Deepcore, and one of our sub-networks in the European fintech space. They want in. That meant 2 more potential clients, both connected, both watching what we do next. I didn't blink. We'll take care of them, I said, already picturing the staffing ramp, the sprint timelines, the onboarding chaos ahead. My heart pounded, not from fear, but from fire. I called Desmond next. He didn't answer. He never answered during tech builds. But a minute later, a message popped up. Give me 72 hours and no distractions. Atlas backend will be airtight. Shiloh looped in soon after. We'll need to register in 2 new jurisdictions if we're onboarding that fast. You ready for that? I told her the truth. No, but we're doing it anyway. We had clients now. We had expectations. And meanwhile, ArcLight? It was burning from the inside. And they didn't even smell the smoke yet. The ripple effect started quietly. An analyst I used to mentor, Jordan Kim, sent me a LinkedIn message that said, "You didn't deserve that. Just wanted you to know." Then, also, if Atlas is hiring. He wasn't alone. Another came the next day. Then 3. Then 4. None of them dramatic. No angry manifestos. Just tired professionals quietly looking for the exit. Atlas didn't have the budget for all of them. Not yet. But I responded to every message. Personally. Directly. Back at ArcLight, I heard through the grapevine, via old vendor contacts, former colleagues, people who hadn't turned on me, that Monica was scrambling. Renee had rewritten the entire client strategy deck, but none of the new language matched the systems I had built. They were trying to pitch modernity with a skeleton crew and stale tools. One client pulled out. Then another asked for a pause in planning. That's when the legal letter came, delivered by courier. Envelope marked confidential. It was from ArcLight's in-house counsel. The usual posturing, a cease and desist. Claims that I had violated non-compete language, shared internal frameworks, and coerced active clients. I didn't panic. I called Shiloh. She met me downtown that evening, at the same quiet booth we'd used before. She wore no makeup, her expression flat and calm. She read the letter once, then twice. Then she laughed. "Silas, you wrote their consultant policy," she said, tapping the final clause of the contract I'd authored 2 years ago. "Your name is literally in the revision log." She flipped the paper toward me, pointing at a highlighted section. "This policy excludes independent consulting ventures engaged post-employment, provided said ventures utilize original frameworks and do not draw from protected or proprietary internal data." Shiloh leaned back. "You built the escape clause before you even needed it." I didn't say anything for a while. I just stared at the clause, stunned by how clean it was. How simple. I had written. Shiloh slid the letter back into its envelope and set it aside. "We'll send a response. Short. Professional. If they push harder, I'll bury them with documentation. Trust me." I did. By the following Monday, Deepcore's legal team reached out. They wanted to move forward with Atlas. Their message was short. "We've reviewed the ArcLight situation. No issues on our end. Please proceed." 2 days after that, we had 4 clients. 4 contracts. full deliverables. Our roadmap was no longer theoretical, it was loaded and rolling. Desmond deployed the first stage of our internal toolset, and our Slack channel exploded with task lists, debug flags, and timelines. Atlas was running. I barely slept. Every morning was a 5:30 a.m. stretch into 30 open tabs, 6 phone calls, and a spreadsheet half covered in coffee stains. Every night ended with handwritten notes scrawled across paper napkins, torn receipts, or the back of Amazon boxes I hadn't gotten around to unpacking. But I was free. I was tired, overwhelmed, anxious, but free. And that was worth everything. Then came a text I didn't expect. From a number I hadn't saved. Just a message. Talia, can we talk? Talia, Monica's executive assistant. Loyal to the bone. Efficient, sharp, always 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. If Monica was a sword, Talia was the hand that sharpened it. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I replied, "What's this about?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then came the response. "They're bleeding. Monica's in emergency meetings. Renee's blaming interns. I think I'm done. Can we meet?" I didn't respond right away. I paced the apartment. I stared out at the city. Then I sent her a time and location. We met in the back of a bookstore cafe, neutral ground. She wore all black, like always. Minimal makeup. Hair tied back. She didn't waste time. "They don't know what they're doing anymore," she said. "There's no plan. No leadership. Clients are pulling out. Staff are quitting. Renee's rewriting documents she doesn't understand, and Monica, she's lost the room." I nodded but said nothing. Talia looked at me carefully. "You didn't deserve what they did to you." "I know." She leaned in. "You building something?" I didn't answer. She smiled. "Good. I want in." That was the moment I knew it was really happening. This wasn't just a rebellion. It was an exodus. The people who had once been loyal to the Empire were now slipping out the side doors, quietly, calmly, and with eyes forward. And when Talia accepted the offer, she didn't come alone. Within a week, we had 2 more defectors. Then 4. Atlas wasn't just growing. It was rising. And back at ArcLight, they were realizing that the man they cut out wasn't the deadweight. He was the spine. And without him, the body collapses. It was poetic, really, how things came full circle without anyone needing to say it. A major e-commerce chain was looking for a full-scale digital transformation partner, and the pitch date landed on a Thursday. Same day of the week Monica used to host leadership syncs in the executive lounge. Same day she announced to the board I'd be transitioning into a new role last fall, as if betrayal was a polite detour. That Thursday, though, it wasn't ArcLight calling the shots. Both firms were on the shortlist. ArcLight Group, clinging to the weight of its name, and Atlas Bridge Consulting, the team they tried to cut from the frame entirely. The client was Morningside, an online retailer that had exploded in the last 3 years. They weren't looking for flash. They wanted execution, simplicity, clarity. And after a grueling 3-round vetting process, only 2 firms remained. I got the email late Sunday night. Final pitch scheduled Thursday. 1 hour. Format: live strategy session and Q&A. Bring no more than 3 team members. Good luck. I stared at the screen and felt nothing. No nerves. No adrenaline. Just focus. Shiloh was already looped into the thread. Her reply came 2 minutes later. "I'll prep legal scenario mapping. You lead." Desmond, predictably, ignored the thread but sent me a text instead. "We smoke them, or we go home. Let's go." We met Wednesday evening to rehearse, not in a conference room, not over catered snacks, but in the back room of a co-working space we were renting by the hour. Folding chairs. A dry erase board with a broken marker. The walls buzzed with Wi-Fi and raw ambition. That was all we needed. We ran through our angles, Desmond on infrastructure modeling, Shiloh on compliance gaps, and me. I stuck to the human problem, the thing most firms forgot. "They're not buying a system," I said, marker in hand, sketching out a rough pyramid of needs. "They're buying breathing room. They want to know that when Black Friday hits, their servers don't die and their customer service team doesn't collapse. We speak to that." Shiloh nodded. "Less tech speak. More impact." Desmond leaned back and cracked his knuckles. "No buzzwords. No disruption. We walk in like we already have the keys." Thursday morning arrived crisp and cold. The kind of morning that makes your breath visible and your pulse sit up straight. We met outside Morningside's headquarters, a clean, glass-paneled building with just enough corporate austerity to remind you the budget was real. And that's when I saw them. Monica and Renee. walking up the steps in lockstep with 3 ArcLight directors in tow, people I used to brief personally, people who once leaned on my strategy decks like gospel. Renee saw us first. She faltered, just a half step, but didn't speak. Monica kept walking, but she glanced sideways. For a second, just a second, our eyes met. No wave. No nod. Nothing. She turned away like I was just another stranger on the street. Let her. They walked in first, escorted by the client's internal project lead, some clean-cut guy in a burgundy sweater and tortoiseshell glasses. They disappeared into the presentation room while we waited in the side lounge, sipping from paper cups and double-checking our handouts. We could hear them. Their voices muffled through the walls, Renee's clipped speech patterns landing too fast, too rehearsed. Monica chiming in with that familiar boardroom calm, the voice of authority without substance. I could hear the chairs shift. Someone cleared their throat. No one laughed. When the door finally opened, they came out in a line. Monica didn't look at me this time, but Renee did. And for a moment, just one brief flash, there was panic in her eyes. The kind that comes when you realize you've just performed for an audience that didn't clap. Then it was our turn. We walked in without fanfare. No branded folders. No company sizzle reel. Just the 3 of us, Shiloh in black, Desmond in his usual gray hoodie and blazer, and me in a navy suit I'd had tailored during better days. The room was long, rectangular, with 12 people seated around the table. The internal lead, burgundy sweater, smiled and gestured toward the open seats. Atlas Bridge Consulting, he said. You have the floor. I didn't waste time. No introductions. No fluff. I walked to the head of the room, held up a single sheet of paper, and said, this is what we propose. 3 phases. 60 days. No inflated timelines. No unnecessary middleware. You get what you asked for, and the oxygen to grow beyond it. They leaned in. Desmond stepped up next, sketching a live diagram on their smartboard. An elegant, modular rollout with failover protections and data flexibility that actually made sense. Shiloh followed by anticipating compliance questions before they even asked. She had a printout ready, outlining every contractual blind spot they hadn't mentioned but absolutely cared about. It wasn't flashy. It was real. By the time we wrapped up, the room was quiet in that good way. The kind where people don't know what to ask because you've already given them the answers. We thanked them, handed over a single-page summary, not a thick brochure, and walked out. No victory speech. No strut. We walked out the same way we walked in, clean, measured, and ready. 3 days later, the call came. Burgundy sweater, now dressed in full business armor. Mr. Byrne, he said, we've made our decision. I didn't speak. I just waited. You're hired, he said. Unanimous vote. I exhaled through a smile. Appreciate the trust, I said. But what I meant was this. You made the right choice. Because in the end, Monica and Renee walked into that pitch trying to perform like leaders. We walked in already leading. The text came just after midnight. One line. Talia, they're bleeding. Monica's holding emergency meetings. Renee's blaming interns. Can we meet? I read it twice, then stared at the ceiling of my apartment, lit only by the glow of my phone. I could already picture the scene. Monica pacing like a queen without her crown, Renee pointing fingers with a trembling hand, directors muttering in corners while junior staff slipped out early and recruiters slipped in quietly. Chaos always starts in the center, then it spreads outward, swallowing everything built on illusion. I responded without hesitation. Tomorrow, 7 p.m. Crescent and Pine. Back patio. The next day moved in slow rhythm. I reviewed contracts, signed off on Phase 2 of Morningside's onboarding, answered 3 client messages, and ignored a call from a blocked number. I didn't need to guess who it was. I didn't care to hear whatever apology, warning, or accusation Monica had finally worked up the nerve to try. At 6:45, I arrived at the restaurant. A quiet Italian place I used to love before it became the go-to spot for ArcLight executive dinners. The staff still remembered me, which helped. They gave us the private patio without question. String lights above. Soft jazz humming through speakers. Autumn air just cool enough to feel sharp without turning cruel. Talia arrived on time. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Dressed in dark gray, like someone between funerals. She sat without speaking, pulled a file folder from her bag, and slid it across the table. Everything's falling apart, she said flatly. I opened the folder. It was packed: project delays, client terminations, HR resignations, 3 internal memos marked urgent. I didn't read it all, I didn't have to. The page that caught my attention was an email thread between Monica and the board. Monica Byrne, the systems are not operating as projected. Legacy frameworks are misaligned with new deployments. Renee is addressing architecture compatibility issues. And then, board member, weren't those systems designed by Silas Byrne? What changed? I looked up at Talia. They can't answer that, she said, because no one really knows. You didn't document everything, at least not in ways they understood. Renee's been trying to recreate your frameworks, but her revisions are full of contradictions. They're calling it a version conflict, but that's just corporate speak for, we broke it, and we don't know how to fix it. I nodded slowly, then closed the folder. How bad is it? She sighed. One of the directors said the only thing holding ArcLight together was denial. Clients are asking why project managers can't explain basic workflows. Interns are training contractors. Vendors are pulling out. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I listened. Because none of this surprised me. You can't remove the foundation from a structure and expect it to balance just because the paint's still fresh. Talia watched me with sharp eyes. They miss you. Even if they don't say it. I'm not going back. I know, she said. Then she leaned forward. Which is why I want in. I studied her. Talia had always been quiet but quick, someone who absorbed everything without needing to advertise it. Monica used to call her an asset. Renee called her a tool. But what neither of them realized was that Talia was also a recorder. She remembered everything. And now, she was done pretending that loyalty had to mean silence. I can't offer you the same salary, I told her. I'm not chasing money. I'm chasing air. Breathing room. Somewhere I don't have to lie just to keep my job. That struck something in me. Because that's what Atlas Bridge had become, a place where people could breathe again. Where they didn't have to perform to be seen. You'll be the third full-time hire, I said. You okay with that? She smiled. I'm okay starting over, as long as it's honest. We shook hands across the table. She didn't waste time. 2 days later, she submitted her resignation, citing personal reasons. Monica didn't respond. Renee tried to call her 3 times, but Talia let them ring out. After Talia came Jonah, one of the finance leads I'd once trained on operational burn rates. Then Mallory, the lead UX strategist who had rewritten our client feedback tools with me last spring. One by one, the seams of ArcLight unraveled, not because I pulled them, but because they were stitched in fear and ego instead of purpose. At Atlas Bridge, we adjusted fast. Desmond expanded server capacity. Shiloh updated contracts. We created a full onboarding kit in 48 hours just to keep up with incoming talent. And the clients noticed. Morningside increased scope. DeepCore added a second project line. A Canadian logistics firm reached out, asking for a consult after hearing how you stabilized Zenith Tech as core. That wasn't marketing. That was word of mouth. Meanwhile, the news about ArcLight trickled out. A quiet press release. CEO Monica Byrne has stepped down citing health-related stress. No interviews. No transition plan. I heard from a former director, off the record, that the board asked Monica to resign. They needed a scapegoat. And she didn't fight it. She looked tired. As for Renee, she vanished from the org chart. 1 week she was head of strategy. The next, gone. No statement. No replacement. Like a shadow that disappeared when the lights finally came on. I didn't toast. I didn't celebrate. I worked. Every day. Late hours. Early mornings. But it didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like ownership. Like I was finally building without someone trying to hollow out the beams beneath me. One night, as I was walking out of our new temporary office, a co-op space that barely fit the whole team, I stopped by the window and looked out over the city. I thought about what we'd lost, what we'd learned, and what we refused to repeat. You can steal someone's seat, their salary, their title, their calendar invites, but you can't steal the why. And Monica and Renee never understood that. They thought the job was the value. But the value was me. 1 year to the day. That's how long it had been since my name disappeared from ArcLight's system with one cold notification, right in the middle of a pitch I created to a client I brought in for a deal I architected. 1 year since Monica and Renee fired me without warning, like I was a bug they could flick off a windshield. Now, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in Atlas Bridge's new downtown office. Corner suite, high above the traffic and noise, and breathed in the quiet hum of purpose. A team of 35 worked behind me, heads down, voices calm, fingers tapping across keyboards and tablets. No scrambling. No chaos. Just work that mattered. 5 contracts were active. 2 more pending by the end of the quarter. Our clients ranged from global logistics to fintech startups, from e-commerce giants to nonprofits. Atlas Bridge wasn't a rebellion anymore. It was a movement built not on flash, not on revenge, but on trust. On showing up and doing the damn job right, every time. The office itself was modest. Clean lines, warm wood, 0 gold plaques or vanity walls. I'd vetoed anything that made it feel like we were trying too hard. Because we didn't need to try, we were the proof. Every paycheck that cleared, every problem we solved, every referral that came not from marketing, but from results. That was the proof. Desmond passed by behind me, coffee in hand, nodding at something on a printed diagram. Shiloh was leading a client call in one of the glass-walled breakout rooms, her voice firm and cool. Talia was onboarding 2 new hires, both former ArcLight staff. No one asked questions anymore when they showed up. They were welcomed, equipped, and trusted to contribute. That was the culture now. No posturing. No performance. I turned back to my desk. On it sat the original Atlas folder, just a name once. A lifeboat scribbled on paper during drinks at the Wren when the waters had started rising. I flipped it open sometimes, just to remind myself what we'd survived. What I'd built with nothing but resilience and a handful of allies who believed in what was possible. They tried to fire me, but they couldn't fire my value. That's what they never understood. Monica thought she was erasing a problem. Renee thought she was stepping into my place like a replacement battery. But clients don't remember who wore the title. They remember who answered the phone at 10 p.m., who sat across from them in conference rooms and told them the truth without hiding behind slides, who took responsibility when things went sideways. That was me. They couldn't steal that. They could strip titles, delete accounts, scrub my name from decks and dashboards, but they couldn't steal the relationships I'd built. They couldn't steal my clarity, my instinct, the way I saw around corners and built frameworks that actually worked, not just ones that sounded impressive in a memo. And they couldn't steal the thing they never even noticed I had: conviction. That quiet, burning belief that doing it right matters more than doing it first. That clients deserve more than buzzwords and polish. That leadership is earned in moments when no one is watching. I walked through the office slowly. People glanced up, smiled, then went back to work. No one stiffened. No one pretended to look busier. I wasn't a figurehead here. I was just Silas. The guy who started something that didn't pretend to be perfect, just honest. On the wall near the kitchen, someone had pinned up a quote. I didn't put it there, but I read it every day. Build something they can't tear down, because they never saw it coming. I stopped by that wall, traced the edge of the paper with my fingers. Then I whispered something to myself, the same phrase I had repeated the night I walked out of that Zenith Tech boardroom a year ago. They don't get the last word. Because they didn't. I did. Through every contract we signed, every person we hired, every company that called because they were tired of being sold to and finally wanted someone who would build for them, not just pitch at them. This wasn't revenge. This was legacy. And it was mine now.